Guys, I'm Shivam S. Today we'll be reading Cinderella, one of the most famous Disney princesses of all time and one of my personal favorites. Cinderella is by Disney, and I know you guys are really going to love this book. Once upon a time, a beautiful girl named Cinderella lived in a faraway land with her father. Cinderella's father loved her very much and wanted her to have a mother, and so he remarried, giving Cinderella a stepmother and two stepsisters. Cinderella longed to be loved by her new family, but when her father suddenly died, she quickly discovered the truth about her stepmother. Lady Tremaine was a cold, cruel woman and was bitterly jealous of Cinderella's charm and beauty. As the years passed, Cinderella became a servant in her own home. Every morning, she rose early to wait on her stepfamily. Her animal friends helped her get ready for her daily chores. One morning, Jack the mouse rushed into the attic room. He shared with Cinderella. A new mouse was caught in a trap. Cinderella hurried down the stairs to rescue him. Cinderella gave the new mouse a shirt, shoes, and a new name, Octavius. "But for short, we'll call you Gus," she said. Gus giggled in approval. Cinderella left Gus with Jack and began her chores. Her first job was to give Lucifer, Lady Tremaine's cat, his breakfast in the kitchen. Cinderella urged her dog Bruno to get along with Lucifer, but the two could hardly stand each other. While the water boiled for her stepfamily's tea, Cinderella fed the animals in the yard. The hungry mice were eager to get their share of corn, but they first had to sneak past Lady Lucifer. One morning, Gus came face to face with the mean old cat. He quickly dashed away and hid under a teacup. Lucifer began to search under the cups when suddenly Lady Tremaine rang her bell. She and her daughters wanted their breakfast right away. Cinderella whisked the trays away, unaware that Gus was under one of the cups. "Cinderella! Cinderella!" Lady Tremaine and her daughters, Anastasia and Drizella, called from their bedrooms. Shortly after Cinderella delivered breakfast, she heard Anastasia shriek. She had found Gus under her cup and thought Cinderella had served her a mouse on purpose. Lady Tremaine called Cinderella to her room and gave her a long list of extra chores to do as punishment, including giving Lucifer a bath. Meanwhile, at the palace, the king was complaining to the Grand Duke. He was very upset that his son the prince was still unmarried. The king decided to throw a ball and invite every eligible maiden so that his son could find a bride. Later that morning, Cinderella paused from her chores to answer a knock at the door. A messenger from the palace handed her an invitation to the ball. Lady Tremaine grabbed the invitation and read it aloud. "By royal command, every eligible maiden is to attend," she said. Her daughter squealed with excitement. "Why, that means I can go too!" exclaimed Cinderella. Anastasia and Drizella laughed at her, but Lady Tremaine agreed to let Cinderella go if she finished her chores and found something suitable to wear. In the attic, Cinderella found a dress that had belonged to her mother. It was a bit old-fashioned, but Cinderella knew she could fix it. Just then, Lady Tremaine called Cinderella downstairs. The dress would have to wait. Cinderella's stepsisters tossed armloads of dresses at her. Each one needed mending and ironing at once. Lady Tremaine gave her even more chores. Cinderella's stepfamily seemed determined to keep her busy. Meanwhile, Cinderella's mouse and bird friends retrieved the stepsisters' discarded sash and beads. With some stitching and folding, they turned Cinderella's simple dress into a fabulous ball gown. When Anastasia and Drizella saw Cinderella's dress, they flew into a jealous rage. The stepsisters ripped at her gown, pulling off the sash and yanking the beads. Lady Tremaine stood by and watched. Heartbroken, Cinderella ran to the garden. "There's nothing left to believe in," she sobbed. "Nothing." Suddenly she heard a cheery voice. Nonsense, child. If you didn't believe, I wouldn't be here. And here I am." Cinderella looked up and saw an older woman smiling at her. It was her fairy godmother. With the wave of her wand, the fairy godmother turned a pumpkin into a With the wave of her hand, the fairy godmother turned a pumpkin into a coach, and Cinderella's mouse friends into white horses. The fairy godmother hurried Cinderella to her coach. But, my dress," Cinderella said. Just then, the fairy godmother noticed Cinderella's torn gown. She pointed her magic wand at Cinderella and said, "Bibbidi bobbidi boo." Cinderella's rags changed into a shimmering gown. On her feet, two dainty glass slippers twinkled like stars. Cinderella was off to the ball with a warning from the fairy godmother. At the stroke of midnight, all the magic would disappear. Meanwhile, at the ball, the Grand Duke and the King watched the prince greet one maiden after another, but none of them seemed to interest him. Anastasia and Drizella took their turn together. They courtesied before the prince, but he was looking at someone behind them. Cinderella had arrived at the ball. Without stopping to think, the prince hurried to her side. She was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen. She was the one he had been waiting for. Cinderella and the prince danced, gazing deeply into each other's eyes. Then the prince took Cinderella for a moonlit stroll across the bridge. The two were falling in love. Suddenly, the clock began to strike midnight. Cinderella had lost all track of time. "Goodbye," Cinderella called to the prince as she hurried away. Both the prince and the Grand Duke tried to stop her, but Cinderella ran off, losing a glass slipper along the way. Cinderella and her friends were barely away from the palace when everything turned back to normal. Her horses became mice, and her carriage turned back into a pumpkin, but she still had one glass slipper. Back at the palace, the king was furious that the girl his son now loved had vanished. He issued a royal decree. The girl whose foot fit the glass slipper would marry the prince. The next morning, Lady Tremaine appeared at Cinderella's bedroom door. Without saying a word, Lady Tremaine locked Cinderella in her room and pocketed the key. She had realized that Cinderella was the girl the prince was looking for. When the Grand Duke arrived, Lady Tremaine and her daughters hurried to greet him. While the Duke explained that every maiden in the kingdom must try on the glass slipper, Gus and Jack managed to steal the key to Cinderella's room. Anastasia and Drizella each tried on the shoe, but they could not squeeze their big feet into the delicate little slipper. The Grand Duke was about to leave when Cinderella appeared at the top of the stairs. Her animal friends had freed her just in time. Lady Tremaine tripped the Grand Duke, and the glass slipper shattered before Cinderella could try it on. But Cinderella still had the other slipper in her pocket. It was a perfect fit. A royal wedding was quickly arranged, and Cinderella and the prince were married. Cinderella's dreams had come true at last. The end. So, why do you guys think that Cinderella's stepmother gave her so many chores despite the ball coming up? And why do you think her sisters were so eager to rip her dress and destroy such a beautiful gown?